Welcome to Centerpoint's Dive In with Matt and Joe.
In this podcast, we're filling in gaps and diving deeper into topics and passages related to the Sunday messages at Centerpoint Church.
I'm Matt.
And I'm Joe. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Dive In.
It is good to be here. We got Matt and Joe together.
Woohoo!
And I think this is one of those days when Matt and Joe probably should not be together.
It hurts so good. He says, wearing his Jalen Hurts jersey.
It's taken us about a half an hour to clear out the silliness.
Well, we are diving into the kiddie pool today.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what's happening with water wings. That should have been our podcast logo.
Water
Matt
wings.
and Joe with little water wings on.
With water wings.
Dive in.
Oh, man.
Little snorkels.
That'd be something.
So we've been doing this podcast for quite some time now, which is fantastic. It's been fun to do here and all the variety. And we're getting a variety of positive feedback. You know, so for those of you who are listening, I want to thank you for that. Mm-hmm. This has been an experiment, and I think the experiment is going well. Mm-hmm. So we've got a couple more weeks yet on Mark.
We do.
Connected to the message series, The Time Has Come. And then we will continue to do this during the Advent series. And then kind of finalize our decisions and how we move forward and all of that. But I want to appreciate everybody's feedback. Some questions came in under the deadline, so that was fantastic. We're going to be able to talk about that next week. And today we really want to spend some more time around this whole section on Jesus's confrontation of the powers. Now, one of the things that came up in some of the questions that people were asking, but it's connected to this week's message, had to do with a very serious passage in this whole section. And I want to read it. This was taken from Mark chapter 14, and it is towards the end of the section where Judas betrays Jesus. And the kiss takes place. Jesus gets arrested. And then verse 50. Then they all deserted him and ran away. Verse 51. Now a certain young man, wearing nothing but a linen cloth, was following him. They caught hold of him, but he left the linen cloth behind and ran away naked.
Yeah, we got some questions on that verse.
So, Joe, tell us a little bit about what's happening here. Who is this dude?
Yeah, well, as one person said, what's up with the naked guy?
What is up with the naked guy?
By the way, I loved the question. It made me laugh. It made me laugh.
Well, the whole we know Mark's not just doing comic relief.
No.
That's not how he's going to construct this thing. Mm-mm. So I have, I don't know, the brain of a 12-year-old, and so it makes me giggle every time I see it.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah, I am. And yet there it is. It's right there.
Yeah, and then he just moves on.
He just moves on,
right? And then the next verse is, they took Jesus to the high priest, the chief priests, elders, teachers of the law. They all came together, and he just keeps going.
Yeah.
Like, what? You can't just drop this in the story and then just move on. What are you doing?
Right. So you got this guy ran away naked.
Yeah.
And away we go. So
this is actually quite brilliant what's happening here.
Yeah, say more about that.
Yeah. Okay. So we can't know this with 100% certainty because Mark actually doesn't name this person. But throughout church history and tradition, there has been a large segment, you can trace this back to the early church fathers, there's a large segment, kind of, I don't want to say the consensus view, but the leading view on what's going on here is that this is actually the author of the gospel inserting himself into the story.
So it's Mark.
So this is John Mark.
John Mark.
Yeah. And I'm saying John Mark because the leading perspective is that John Mark is the one who wrote the Gospel of Mark. And John Mark is somebody who we read about in the book of Acts, we learn that he is Barnabas's cousin. So if you remember, Barnabas was one of Paul's travel companions. So John Mark is Barnabas's cousin. We learned from the book of Acts that John Mark's mom would open up her house in practicing hospitality for the early church leaders. This is actually where Peter goes in, I think it's Acts chapter 12, after the angel frees him from prison. He goes to John Mark's mom's house. Paul actually has a bit of a spat with Barnabas over John Mark, but then later we read in some of Paul's letters that they have reconciliation and they make up, and John Mark is actually a key part of Paul's ministry. And we also learned from the end of 1 Peter that Peter was very held John Mark in high regard. He actually calls him a son, like a spiritual son. So it's just really clear from the New Testament that John Mark, while he wasn't one of the apostles, was on the inner circle with the apostles, particularly after Jesus rose from the dead. So this is all evidence within the New Testament itself. So when we come back to this passage with who is this naked young man here, church history says this is John Mark putting himself here in the story, that this actually happened, that because of his relational connections, he was on the periphery here, and he was concerned about what's going to happen to Jesus. So do you remember, Matt, where this part of the story is taking place? Where was Jesus arrested?
It was the garden.
Okay, so it was the garden.
Yeah.
So we have a man naked in a garden running.
Yeah.
What might that bring up?
Well, in my mind, it's bringing up Genesis.
Yeah. Yeah, say more about that.
Well, it was God created the man and the woman, put them in the Garden of Eden, filled with flourishing goodness and everything. And so that becomes the picture throughout the biblical narrative of God's presence in creation, heaven and earth together, God's abundance, flourishing life, beauty, and goodness. But through human rebellion, it all comes crashing down. And when God went looking for humanity, he approached and, where are you? Found them hiding behind a bush. Why are you hiding? Well, because we're naked. Mm-hmm. And so right after the creation narrative in Genesis 2, it says they were naked and not ashamed.
Right.
And then here in Genesis 3, through sin and rebellion, they recognize that they were naked and they were shamed. And then they have this conversation around that. And then as God is removing them from the garden, mm-hmm. just before he removes them from the garden, sends them out into exile, into the wilderness, he actually clothes them. Mm-hmm. He covers their shame.
That's right.
And he does so through the skin of an animal. So they tried to cover their own shame through leaves, kind of vegetation, which isn't all that great at covering human bodies.
You wouldn't know from personal experience, though.
I've tried it a few times just to kind of test out the biblical theory.
As long as it wasn't poison ivy.
That would be a problem, wouldn't it? That would totally make sense.
Especially for people like
Genesis
me who
3.
are highly sensitive to it, and I swell up like Hitch. Even if I just get a little bit on me.
As a matter of fact, just saying poison ivy, you got a spot on your forehead.
I'll be back.
So then God, in that story, covers them mm-hmm. as he's setting them up.
Yeah.
And so that it's like that whole thing is coming on board
right
as
here.
We're in this story. Mm-hmm. Andy did a great job talking about that in the prayer in the garden. Mm-hmm. And here the garden comes up again. And it's the place of arrest and suffering. Mm-hmm. Let's say it is John Mark was there, but now everybody's scattering.
Yeah, everybody deserted him.
Everybody deserted Jesus. Mm-hmm. And he even leaves behind his toga.
Right.
So he's naked in the garden again.
Here we are.
But this is all a passage around shame.
Yeah,
really.
That's exactly it. Because this is a shame honor culture.
Yeah.
And here they are, all deserting their master, their rabbi, their teacher. This is very shameful what's happening.
And so it's bringing back the shame of nakedness. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't a middle school snicker moment.
No, it's way weightier than that.
It was a shame-filled moment.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And wouldn't it be interesting? So there's even a sense in how Mark writes this that those who had been the first to read it kind of understood who it was. Mm-hmm. So it didn't need to come with a name. It didn't need to come with a lot of explanation on this one. So they just kind of knew. And if it was him, he's really exposing himself.
I was trying to compose it, but you listeners, you heard it. Matt said Mark was really exposing himself.
Well,
here.
he was, because he was setting himself up as the one who bore shame. That he was involved in, that he himself was one who ran.
Right. Yeah. So there's something in the self-deprecation that the authors of the New Testament, including themselves in the story, have that actually makes the story more believable.
Yeah.
It's powerful what's happening here, and just we won't touch on this too much because it's actually going to be in the passage we're going to preach on this week. But the young man who's naked in the garden here at the end of 14 is contrasted then in chapter 16, where some of the ladies go to the tomb this after Jesus is risen, and it says in verse 5, as they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. As this is contrasting, these young men become kind of a rhetorical way of contrasting the nakedness and shame and desertion of Jesus with the reality that he's still good. He still holds it together. He still is going to work on behalf of his people. He's still going to chase them down in their exile. He's still going to run after them in his love. So this phrase, young man, it's the same phrase in the original language, right? So it's this contrast between humanity's frailty and folly and sin contrasted with the faithfulness of Jesus here.
Because it's Jesus' faithfulness that is bringing about this new thing.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
The new life.
Yeah, new creation crashing in.
Yeah.
So I don't want to get too far into that because we'll cover that this weekend, but just a little teaser.
Yeah.
How these are rhetorically connected in Mark's gospel.
No, that's really helpful, Joe. Glad we took the time to flesh that out a little bit.
Yeah, me too. And couldn't see it, but was laughing quite a bit there. So we laughed together.
Indeed we do.
Yeah, so there was just so much, Matt, that you covered in this past Sunday's message. Was there anything else that you were hoping that we would kind of settle in on and unpack a bit more? I've got a couple of things, but...
Well, let's go with that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, my kind of the things that were coming to my mind actually flowed out of a few conversations I had on Sunday after the message, and some of the questions that folks had that they were asking me just in person was kind of along the lines of, can you help me understand the historical cultural pieces going on with Pilate? And can you help me understand the history of the Sanhedrin? Like, they were tracking, because you didn't take a ton of time to unpack, you didn't have time, but you helped us understand the Sanhedrin were the religious leaders, the highest office, if you will, the greatest and most powerful decision makers in Israel.
Right.
And so we don't have to unpack both of those things, Pilate and the Sanhedrin, but those were some of the historical pieces that I think, when we explore a little bit more, help us understand really the gravity of what's happening in this story.
Sure. Well, should we talk a little bit about the history of the Sanhedrin?
Sure. And I didn't do a deep dive into it. That's why I was making a joke about the kiddie pool earlier. But
sure.
But yeah, so the Sanhedrin, and we're pulling this from the end of Mark chapter 14. So starting in verse 53, Mark tells us that they take Jesus to, now listen to what he says, the high priest, the chief priests, the elders, and the teachers of the law who came together. Mm-hmm. So then he goes on in verse 55 to say the whole Sanhedrin. So the word Sanhedrins is summarizing those categories of people. So the Sanhedrin, this was the highest governing council of Jewish leaders in the nation in Jesus' day. So this was comprised of roughly 70 members, and that number 70 actually goes all the way back to Genesis chapter 10 with the Table of Nations, where it lists 70 nations. So it's just a Jewish symbolic way of talking about all the nations, and so that's why they were intentional about having around 70 members.
Was it pre-Moses?
You're talking about the
Sanhedrin,
or are you talking about the Table of
Sanhedrin?
Nations?
So the Table of Nations was pre-Moses.
Correct, yeah.
But was the Sanhedrin as a thing was just an echo of that in Genesis. So it wasn't what was established in Genesis.
Correct.
So the Sanhedrin would go closer to Moses's time.
With a
reflection of that.
That I would need to look into a bit more, the chronology of when the Sanhedrin originally gets formed.
Yeah.
So just dropping us into Jesus's day, this is the leading kind of ruling governing council, right? And so it's comprised of the chief priest. So there was one of those, the high priest. There's one of those over the nation. So he's kind of the point person on this council. And then the chief priests were part of this council as well. And so the chief priests were kind of mostly Sadducees. And so this was a group of religious aristocrats in the nation. So these would have been highly influential and affluent religious families. And they had a particular set of beliefs that would differ from the Pharisees. So kind of succinctly put, the Sadducees only adhered to Torah, the first 5 books of what we call today the Old Testament, where the Pharisees would have adhered to the Tanakh, which is what we call the whole Old Testament today. So that's kind of the biggest religious difference there between these two groups. But these chief priests, again, mostly Sadducees, adhering to the 5 books of Moses, the first 5 books of our Old Testament, they were very influential and powerful. So that's the chief priest. So they primarily were controlling the temple relations with Rome in particular. So they had a lot of vested interest in working with Rome, cozying up to Rome, making sure that their agenda could be pushed and advanced in a way that got Rome's backing, if you will. So that's the chief priest. Then we have the scribes. So these are mostly Pharisees. So scribes, or as Mark says, the teachers of the law. So mostly Pharisees. They adhere to the whole Old Testament. They were kind of your more academic, trained, scholarly leaders who would help parse out the Old Testament and how it applied to kind of matters of the day in Israel. And so they controlled the legal opinions and interpretation of the Old Testament here in Jesus' day. And then the last category we have is the elders. So these were wealthy, influential leaders in Israel. They weren't necessarily the religious elite, but let's think about them as the political elite. So they controlled social, political, and community authority. So if we just pause there, those 4 categories, the high priest, chief priests, scribes, and elders, you put those things together, and you have the legal authority, the political authority, and the spiritual authority all coming together over the whole nation of Israel on this council of men. That's a lot of power.
It is a lot of power, and it also had limits.
Correct.
In that time, particularly under Roman rule, because Rome gave them enough power to pacify them, but not truly empower them.
Right.
So I actually I looked into this a little bit around the Sanhedrin and the 70, and we find it in Numbers chapter 11.
Oh, kind of its origin.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where, let me just read it.
Yeah, please.
Numbers 11:16. The Lord answered Moses, "Bring me 70 men from Israel, known to you as elders and officers of the people. Take them to the tent of meeting and have them stand there with you. Then I will come down and speak with you there. I will take some of the Spirit who is on you and put the Spirit on them. They will help you bear the burden of the people so that you do not have to bear it by yourself.
Yes. Okay. So this is the origin story of
That's
kind
the
of the
origin
structure.
story of the Sanhedrin.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
Which echoes the Table of Nations.
Yes, back
but
in
it's,
Genesis
it's
10.
God's instruction for the bearing of the weight of leadership of his people.
That's right.
But it's also this, it's almost a small little picture of Pentecost.
Oh.
Right? And so God is saying, you've been given the Spirit.
Yes.
I'm actually going to take that same Spirit, I'm going to sprinkle it on all of them now too. And so now they're going to have the same Spirit that you have. And so it just seems like a little precursor.
Oh, this is real-time connection here. Okay. Oh, that's awesome.
And then I talked about this a little bit in the message, where I was thinking about Moses after he'd met with the Lord and he reflected God's glory.
Yes.
So he put a veil over his face.
Mm-hmm.
And then he kept the veil over his face because he didn't want people to notice that the glory had gone. And so here with Moses, God says, choose these 7. I'm going to put my Spirit on them. That same Spirit that reflects my glory into the world that's in you, I'm going to give to them. So the God's Spirit was in that, the tent of meeting, covering the elders in this council. And then what we see with Jesus is he is making it abundantly clear that Spirit has left.
Correct.
God no longer resides in the temple.
Correct.
You have kept up appearances of righteousness, but you have acted in complete disharmony with the heart of God.
That's a good word.
You know, the temple was to be the light of the world,
right?
Bringing all nations to worship Yahweh there, but instead they kept people out. Right? So we go back to Jesus clearing the temple.
Yes.
We go back to Jesus's pronouncement about tear this down and I'll rebuild it in 3 days.
Give me 3 days. Yeah.
So Jesus is pronouncing judgment. And in this passage in Mark, standing before the Sanhedrin, he's exposing it.
Yeah. So while for the average Israelite, the Sanhedrin was the ruling council of the nation and wielded lots of power, from a theological perspective, what you're reminding us of is from the Lord's vantage point, the leading council, the Sanhedrin, had actually rejected him.
Yes.
Rejected his purposes. And so Jesus was laying bare the impotence of the Sanhedrin, the fact that God had actually left. He was no longer empowering this council.
Right. Because it was not serving God's purposes.
Exactly, because this council was actually not just neutral at this point, but they were actually, I like that word, in disharmony with Yahweh's purposes of seeing the nations come to him. Yeah, they were keeping people out. So you're right. Under Rome, the council of the Sanhedrin, their power is limited, so they actually could not sentence anybody to death without the approval of Rome. And so that's why we see in this passage that you preached on Sunday, they're really pushing hard for Pilate's approval here to get the green light.
And they're not even trying to justify it.
Oh, no, this is a kangaroo court at this point.
Yeah. And Mark is being really clear about that as he's recording this. Even Pilate understood. This was really about the ego of the Sanhedrin. He was trying to call their bluff in a way.
He was.
That gave them an out, but at the end of the day, gave in.
Yeah. Can we talk about Pilate for a minute?
Sure.
Or two? So Pilate is an interesting one because you're right. He makes a few attempts here to not have this move forward, but he caves to the pressure of the people.
And that's ultimately what bends him. Mm-hmm. Isn't that fascinating? So here's this man who wields the authority of Rome.
Think about that for a second. The most powerful empire on earth in this day.
Yeah.
Right?
He is the voice of Rome in this
Correct.
In this
region, he's the voice. Mm-hmm.
And the power that comes with. Mm-hmm. And yet he bends to the crowd.
He does. In fact, it's not here in Mark's gospel, but in John chapter 19, verse 12, the religious leaders are really pressing on Pilate, and they remind him that, hey, if you don't sentence Jesus to death, right? He's proposing that he's king, then you're actually being disloyal to Caesar. You're no friend of Caesar's. That's no small threat that they're making there. That's actually a really legitimate button to push on Pilate, because history tells us, so we've got two Jewish historians, Josephus and Philo. So this is extra biblical history, so meaning outside of the Bible. But these two Jewish historians, Josephus and Philo, both independently talk about Pilate. And they talk about how harsh and violent he was. They talk about how he provoked early on in his reign as prefect over Judea. He provoked the Jewish people, like he was goading them into revolting. There is a record of complaints from both Jews and Samaritans that were lodged formally to Rome. He has to go and stand before Caesar
to give account.
To give account for some of his actions. And this is before this moment that we're reading about in the New Testament. So he is skating on thin ice politically in this moment here in Mark's gospel. He is on very thin ice to go and stand before Caesar, literally the most powerful man in the world. And he was rebuked by Caesar for his mishandling of things in his role. That is no small thing. So this is really significant. So we might look at this and go, oh, Pilate was just so weak. And on one hand, yes. But on the other hand, let's empathize here. Let's put ourselves in his shoes. I'm not saying what he did was okay, but what I am saying is they are really, really twisting the arm here.
Sure.
Right, because this is a shame honor culture. He's been rebuked by Caesar once. If he goes before him a second time, he's done. So...
and by done, you mean he gets a little retirement villa
yeah, exactly.
off to the side.
Right. Mm-hmm. No, done could mean a variety of things in the Roman Empire, but most certainly it meant a stripping of your power. Sometimes it meant political exile. So there's actually one historical theory is he's exiled to what is modern-day France. Another theory is that he is so shamed by what happens that he goes and he actually takes his own life. So we don't know for sure, but these are speculated throughout church history. So this is really significant. So Pilate is under a ton of pressure in this passage from the crowd, from the Sanhedrin, and from Rome.
Yeah, so as you're articulating that, I guess I didn't realize that Pilate had goaded the people.
Yeah, so now I'm not saying here.
Yeah, no, yeah,
but
right.
earlier kind of, on in his rulership.
And so it makes me think about Barabbas, who was an insurrectionist.
Right. That's the word that Mark uses actually here in chapter 15, verse 7.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very specific word there.
Right.
But we just know that he was a part of the insurrection. And even the way Mark talks about Barabbas, who was in prison with rebels who had committed murder during the rebellion. Mm-hmm. So there's a sense in which everybody who would have read this originally would have known what rebellion that was.
Yeah, so it's talking about a very specific rebellion.
Yeah. Uh-huh. So he was a part of that.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm not wanting to sidetrack even what you were saying about Pilate, but it just made my mind go, I'm curious.
Well, so what's interesting, this was a question that was submitted for our final dive in on the Gospel of Mark, but I think we can actually talk about it now because it applies to what we're discussing. So the question was the desire to release Barabbas simply out of spite? Like spite to Jesus, it specifically says, and not wanting Jesus released? Or is there a deeper spiritual battle taking place that the Jewish people may not have even been aware of, given the fact that Barabbas' name means son of the Father? I just think that's a really good question.
And so asking what were the motivations of the people, the crowd, who were crying for Barabbas.
And then Pilate.
Mm-hmm. And the Sanhedrin.
Yeah, kind of these three big groups who are going to collude together.
Why would they have wanted Barabbas? Mm-hmm. What do you think?
Yeah, whose Bar means son of, and Abba means father, so son of the Father, like you pointed out in your message.
So there's contrast.
Yeah.
In how Jesus is identifying himself with clarity. Mm-hmm. And this one who is not the Messiah.
Right.
He's not the Son of Man.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a facade of sorts. Ironically enough, he participated in rebellion in the way that the Jewish people wanted Messiah to do.
Mm.
So he came with the big flex.
And violence.
Mm-hmm. And that's what a lot of them had an imagination for when Messiah comes, he will do that. Again, I'm not saying that they were thinking that he was Messiah.
Yeah, you're not saying that they thought Barabbas was Messiah.
No.
But you're talking about Barabbas' way.
But it's part of the contrast.
Barabbas' way, the way of Barabbas.
Yeah, which is the way of human power.
Yeah.
The flex towards
right
fear and violence.
Well, and they would have also, their imaginations would have been shaped by that also from the Maccabean revolt. I don't know that we've talked a ton about that in this podcast. So
no, I don't think we've talked at all about it.
I'd have to fact check myself. So if you want to check in real time, please do. But the Maccabean revolt, I want to say, was roughly 100 years before Jesus, and it was the Jewish people were living in the land, but it was enemy occupied and owned territory. So they're kind of living in land that's not theirs, and they're tired of being oppressed. And so there's this man and his family who actually generate an uprising through the sword. And one of the sons' names is Judas Maccabeus. This is the Maccabean revolt. And they kind of use guerrilla warfare tactics, and they actually are able to hold off the empire of that day and take some land back for themselves. And so they have this little short-lived dynasty where they're kind of owning the land, and then it quickly falls back when Rome takes over. And so in their imaginations, Barabbas actually is walking in that way. And so whether or not they endorse Barabbas, that we're not answered that. But this way of revolution through violence, revolution through the sword, they would have had that on their brains because it was not too far removed chronologically in Jesus' day, this Maccabean revolt.
Yeah, what I'm seeing right here as I'm looking it up is the rebellion was from 167 to 160 BC.
Okay, so about 150 years before
about 150 years before this. And yeah, so it was significant.
Very significant.
And it's actually the beginning of Hanukkah.
That is the origin story of Hanukkah.
That, yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Goes back to the Maccabean revolt.
Right, during the rededication of the temple, running out of oil, but the oil never ran out.
It did not.
And so that's the beginning of Hanukkah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you think about that, right? That's capturing imaginations. Now, we don't have time to get into all this because we're already running short on time, but who betrayed Jesus?
Judas. Judas.
Judas. Whose name...
Maccabee.
We're speculating, but whose name, I imagine mom and dad, maybe there are some Judases in the family line, as there often were when names were given, but boy, I would put some money on it. I bet they had the Maccabean revolt in their mind when they named their brand new baby son Judas.
Isn't that interesting? and even, because again, it's speculative, but it certainly would have come online for people who were reading Mark's account of this.
Yeah, so it's like, man, here's a guy who's a player at the table. He can make things happen. And what does Judas do? He sees and he takes.
And he has been seeing and taking.
He has
because
been.
we learned that that's how he handles the money purse.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we're using our sanctified imaginations as we are sitting with the story. I'll just kind of throw out there, I think The Chosen captures part of this really well with kind of their portrayal of Judas and things that are motivating him internally. I think they capture some of these pieces really well. So we're talking Judas was the betrayer who kissed the Son. That's Psalm 2. Kiss the Son lest he be angry. This messianic psalm, looking forward to the day when the Anointed One would come and rule over the nations. So I'm just saying, man, was Judas trying to kickstart a revolution? Again, we're not told that overtly, but
There are pieces that line up.
Yeah. So you've got Judas maybe trying to kickstart a revolution, taking his own way. You had Barabbas,
who had been a part of a revolution.
Yep, that's right.
Built on seeing and taking.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Revenge.
Yeah. And so you just see how hell is throwing everything that it can at Jesus in this moment. I love the way you said it in your message. It's like these things that creep and lurk in the background and incite humanity to violence, right? And seeing and taking. It's now like they're all out in the open and they're all just dumping themselves onto Jesus.
It is a massive, hellish dog pile.
Yeah, so the earthly powers and the evil spiritual powers all colluding together. Religion, empire, the crowds, the powers in spiritual places, all of them are coming together. And this is a kangaroo court, and it is getting greenlit in every way that it can.
It has nothing to do with justice. Mm-mm. Has nothing to do with righteousness. Mm-mm. Has nothing to do even with Yahweh.
No.
And yet they're trying to protect Yahweh's reputation.
Yeah, because they accuse the thing that breaks the straw is it's blasphemous.
Right.
He is saying he is the Messiah. That nod back to Daniel chapter 7, where they tear their garments. Yeah, this is, and then man, just the way that you landed the plane on the message with this is true power, is standing in the strength of the Lord under everything that hell can throw.
He didn't fight back. Mm-mm. He didn't call down the legions of angels. Could have. He didn't wield power in the way that people were used to wielding power, and yet his let's be clear, he stood in power.
Correct.
But it was the power of the kingdom. It's the power of love.
Yes.
And not in a Christmas time Hallmark movie kind of love.
Mm-mm. No, this is the strength of love being displayed in this story is mind-blowing.
It is cosmic. It is hell-shattering. Mm-hmm. Earth rescuing. Mm-hmm. God's love.
Yeah. And it looks, from an earthly standpoint, it looks like weakness, foolishness, insanity. Yeah. Why won't you defend yourself? Like, you can just hear it in Pilate's voice. Like, why won't you say something?
Give me something here.
I'm trying to help you.
Right. But he's not looking for help.
No.
He's giving himself to it.
No, because as he said, I lay down my life on my own accord. I choose when I lay it down. I choose when I take it up. Power.
That's power.
It's power. You know, and I think, you know, as we're coming to a close in this episode, but this is our second to last one in this series, I want to be mindful how I say this, because it comes from if I'm being honest with myself, it comes from a place of care and pastoral protection. But we live in a day and age and in a cultural moment where violence is increasing. Violence is in some places applauded. Violence is increasingly being justified. I think back to some surveys done just within the last few years, so kind of post-COVID moment in the world, where it was talking about, regardless of political party, that more adults than not were saying that their preferred political party, it was justifiable for their preferred party to use violence to advance the party's agenda. Like, that's the world that we live in. And so Jesus' power and the power that he gives to his people stands in sharp contrast to the powers that invite us to use violence and then death, which is Satan's ultimate weapon, where he uses death to get others to bend the knee, to get others to fall in line, to get others to cooperate. And so this power that we're reading about here, isn't just, wow, that was really powerful in that moment that Jesus did that. Yeah, it was. And yes, and this is the power. This is the way of Jesus. This is the way that you and this is the way that we are invited to walk. This is love.